We are on Daf Kuf Beis, Amid Beis, at the very end of the Gemara. The Gemara, just to finish up the sugya, the Mishnah had said that if a person takes flour and he says, Zu lahavi machvas, I'm going to bring a machvas, I'm going to use this flour to bring a carbon as a machvas, and he puts it in a marcheshes, it's puzzle. The reason why it's puzzle is because you already designated this as a machvas. If you place in a marcheshes, it's now nikva as a marcheshes. So because you're stuck, you have to discard of it. So the Gemara says kasha, v'hatanya, but doesn't the Brisa say loy kitchim klishares, that merely placing it in a klishares does not be kaveyad, is not mekadesh it, that it must be used? Meaning, you're saying that the reason why it's disqualified is because it is a machvas flour. So it definitely has to be used a machvas. The problem is you place it in a marcheshes, you're now stuck, because now you've made it a marcheshes, but it's got to be a machvas. So because you're stuck, you have to discard of it. But doesn't the Brisa say that a klisharis is not koveya, is not mekadesh, loy kitchim klisharis, that a klisharis is not mekadesh, meaning when you place it in the klisharis, you should be able to take it out of the klisharis and put it back into the other one. Meaning, I put it into a marcheshes. I meant it's supposed to be machvas. I put it in a marcheshes. It's too late. Why? Why can't I take it out of the marcheshes and put it into the proper kli? So the Gemara says, no. Amar Abaya, loy kitchem li karev, I will kitchem lifsel. No, the kli is mekadesh it enough to mess it up. Meaning, when you put it in the wrong kli, it's not mekadesh that you could bring it on the mizbeach. So if I say this flour is a machvas and I place it in a marcheshes, the kli marcheshes is not going to fix it enough that it could be placed on the mizbeach. But it's going to be mekadesh enough to mess it up. So it's mekadesh enough, lifsel. So it's mekadesh enough that you no longer can put it back, and because of that you're stuck. Now the Gemara has said this entire concept is I take flour and I say this, Harei zu machvas, that I'm making a neder upon myself to bring this flour as a machvas, so that it must be brought in a machvas. But says the Gemara, lo yishanu, Rabbi, lo yishanu, this is only true, ela shekavan b'shas neder. The case has to be where I make a neder, so I take flour, my first statement is I make a neder, it's not going to happen, it's I make a neder, that was funny. That was just for me. The point is, I make a neder, I take flour, and I make a neder. The first statement I have is I say, this is a machvas. Once I make the neder, this is a machvas, I can't change it. But let's say the case is as follows. I say I'm going to bring a mincha. I don't specify at the time. I just say I'm going to bring a mincha. A week later, I say it's going to be a machvas. Then the halach is it's not kevei, I could change my mind. That b'shas neder is keveya. If at the time of the neder, the time of the original statement, you dictated which type of carbon, you can't change it. But if you just say you're going to bring a standard mincha and you don't specify which one, and you later on, when you actually take the flour from the store, you say, this is going to be a machvas, you could change it. Because b'shas hafrasha is not significant enough to force you in that niche. Says the Gemara, lo yishanu lo shekavan b'shas neder. Av b'shas hafrasha. But if at the time of the neder you just say, I'm going to bring a mincha, and then at b'shas hafrasha you want to change your mind, lo, you're not stuck with it, you could change your mind. Why? Kasher nedarta v'lo kasher kafrashta. The pasuk says that the neder, that the carbon is dictated b'shas nedarta, at the time of the oath, not b'shas hafrasha. Itmar Nami, a Brisa similarly states, Amr of Acha bar Chanina, it's actually not a Brisa, it was just stated by a Maimer Chazal, Amr of Acha bar Chanina, Amr of Asi, Amr of Yechonod, Loi Shanu Ela Shekavan B'Shas Neder, Aval Kavan B'Shas Hafrasha, Loi Kasher Nadarta, V'Loi Kasher Hafrashta. Okay, now, the Mishnah over here, this will take us from this Mishnah to the next Mishnah, is going to be dealing with the following premise. The Mishnah says, Ha'omer, Harei Alai Mincha, so far so good, Min HaSa'orim. I'm going to bring a mincha of barley. Now, there is no optional mincha of barley. The only mincha of barley that existed was the oimer, that was the carbon sibar, and a saita, which you can't optionally put yourself in. So you say, I'm going to bring a mincha of barley. So there's two options of what this statement means. Either it's a ridiculous statement that has no meaning, and the entire you're not dictated to require. It's nothing. It's a batel. Or we take the first part of your statement and not the second part of your statement. The full statement as its whole, it makes no sense. There is no such thing as an optional mincha from Sairim. It doesn't make sense. The two choices are, you could either go with the first part of a statement, which is a mincha, and then you'll have to bring a mincha of wheat, or you take the whole statement as a whole, and your whole statement as a whole is ridiculous, and we're not going to hold you by your statement, and it's poof, it's gone. So it says the Mishnah, if a person says, I'm going to bring mincha, but from barley, yavi menachitim. We accept your statement, but only the first part of your statement. You have to bring a mincha from wheat, because there's no such thing as a mincha from barley. Similarly, kemach. I'm going to bring kemach. Kemach was unrefined flour. There were no karbanos from kemach, at least optional karbanos. There were some, but not optional karbanos. So you say, I'm going to bring a mincha of kemach. There's no such thing as kemach for an optional mincha. It's soyless. You need refined flour. So here's what we do. It's the same thing. We take the first part of your statement, a mincha, and then we tell you to do it right. So it says the Mishnah, yavi soyless. You say, b'loy shemen or b'loy levoina. I'm going to bring a mincha without oil, without frankincense. Optional minchas come with oil and frankincense. So then, yavi shemen levaina. Chatzi isaron. You say, I'm going to bring a half of an isaron. I'm a mincha, which is a half isaron. There is no mincha half isaron. Minchas were always an isaron. That was the volume of measure. So you have to bring a regular mincha of an isaron. Let's say you say, isaron umechza. I'm going to bring a mincha 1.5 isaron. There is no 1.5 isaron option. So here's what you do. You have to bring 2 isaron. The halach is yavi shnaim. You have to bring 2 isaronos. The Gemara will address in that case, why don't we say that at least we could take the first part of your statement, bring a full isaron, and the second part, the half of an isaron, should just be batal, and it's not like your statement is meaningless. You're still bringing an isaron. The Gemara will address this. Rav Shimon says, no, I disagree in all these cases. Poiter. Rav Shimon says, no, as the Gemara will explain, Rav Shimon takes the whole statement, not just the first part of the statement. He takes the whole statement, and the whole statement is meaningless. So you're not obligated to keep your word. All of these are batel. If it makes sense. If it makes sense. If it makes sense. I'm going to drive you to Brooklyn on my plane. It doesn't make sense. There's no such thing. My whole statement as a whole makes no sense. I'm going to bring a mincha from barley. There's no such thing as a mincha from barley.
But after that, it says that you have to bring a whole barley. You have to bring whatever.
That's the Tanakama shita, because the Tanakama goes with the first part of your statement. Rav Shimon says, I take your whole statement as a whole, and your whole statement is meaningless.
No, I understand this thing. You should say that.
Because you take the first part of your statement. The first part of your statement. You said you're going to bring a mincha. Fine. He then said, Sa'irim. I don't care about your second part. We go with your first part. The Gemara will address it. The Gemara says, Amai, why in this case do we say that you're chayiv to bring a carbon? Is it neder or pischai imahu? Why don't we say that it's a statement and then an immediate retraction? We had this previously in the Masechta, Machloikis Beishamai Beis Hillel. Instead of saying we look at the whole statement as ridiculous, say it's a neder and then an immediate, within Teichadei Dibur, an immediate retraction. You know, say, I'm going to do this, I take it back. The halach is you could take it back. So why are we not taking this as a retraction? The Gemara says, Amar Chizkiah Hamani Beis Shammai. Chizkiah says it's Taka Machlekes Tanoim. You're right. Beis Hillel would say it's a retraction. Our Mishnah, which says that we take the first part of your statement and not the second part of your statement, is the Shita of Beis Shammai. What's the Beis Shammai? The Amri Tfus Lashon Beis Shammai Shita is that we don't look at it as an immediate retraction. We look at it as the first part of your statement is legitimate. I don't care about the second part of your statement. What was Beis Shammai referring to? Beis Shammai referring to Tanan Hareini Nazir min Agroigus min Atvela. A person says, I'm going to be a Nazir and not eat figs. That's not a thing. A Nazir doesn't eat wine. It doesn't eat grapes. There's no such thing as a Nazir of not eating figs. So you could look at it 2 ways. You could look at it as it's a statement and then an immediate retraction. Meaning when he said, I'm a Nazir, he meant it. And then when he said from figs, that was his immediate retraction, in which case it's a retraction. Beis Shammai says, no, I go with the first part of your statement. You said you're a Nazir, you're a Nazir. So to over here, you said you're going to bring a mincha, okay. You then said Sa'irim, I don't care. Immediate retraction. We don't say that, that's Beis Hillel. Beis Shammai says, we take the first part of your statement. Hareini Nazir min Agroigus min Atvela. Beis Shammai oimrim Nazir. Beis Hillel oimrim ina Nazir. So our Mishnah follows Beis Shammai. Good. Rav Yochanan has a different pshat. He says, no, our Mishnah can even follow Beis Hillel. Why don't we say that it's immediate retraction? So says the Gemara, Afilu Teim Beis Hillel. Over here, it's the following case. Ba'omer ilu hayisi yodeya ashein noidern kach, loy hayisi noider kach elakach. Beis Hillel says like this. Beis Hillel's concept is that when you take a statement that the first part is like A, and then the second part is just completely ridiculous, normally we say, he didn't mean it. You want to call it immediate retraction, you want to say that he was just messing around. He didn't mean it. A person says, I'm a Nazir from figs. He doesn't mean it. It falls apart, nothing. This case specifically, the guy comes over and he says, I'm going to bring a mincha from barley. At that point, we're not sure what he means. So we ask him, you can't bring a mincha from barley. It has to be from wheat. And then he responds, oh, okay, then I'll bring it from wheat. That's the case where it's chal. Meaning, because your statement, it's possible you meant it, because there are, as we'll see in the Gemara, there are minchas from barley, right? Meaning, in the case, let me just sort of say this outside the Gemara. Next Gemara will be a lot easier. According to Beis Hillel, we don't say it's a statement of immediate attraction. We sort of look at the statement and say, well, did he mean it? In the case where he said, I'm a nazir from figs, every child knows that's not a thing. So when he says, I'm a nazir from figs, he's messing around and his words have no meaning. However, when a person says, I'm going to bring a mincha from barley, there are minchas from barley. Not one that he could bring, but it is possible, it exists. He didn't say, I'm going to bring a mincha from cotton candy. He said, I'm going to bring a mincha from barley. So because that does exist, we ask him and we try to figure out, if he meant it, then he has to bring a regular mincha. If he's messing around, then it doesn't count. So we ask him, we say, hey, you know that there's no such thing as a mincha from barley. And then he's like, oh, okay, fine, I'll bring it from wheat. Then it's chal. As the Gemara is going to point out in a second, let's say he were to say, I'll just say this now, it'll be a little easier. Let's say, according to Beis Hillel, what's a nafka amina between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel? I'll tell you. What if he says, I'm going to bring a mincha from lentils? Now, according to Beis Shammai, we just take the first part of your statement. I don't care about the second part. You said mincha, done. According to Beis Hillel, no. We have to figure out, did he mean it? No one could believe there's a mincha from lentils. Wheat for sure. Barley, it at least exists in some iteration, not one that he could bring. If you were to say, I bring a mincha from lentils, then Beis Hillel would agree it's nothing. But our case is he said a mincha from barley, which could mean he might have meant it. So we ask him, and we say, because if he meant it, he just misspoke, then it's a neder. If he didn't mean it, he's messing around, it doesn't count. So we ask him, we say, hey, you know there's no such thing as from barley? And he's like, all right, fine, I'll bring it from wheat. But if it's lentils, we don't even talk to him. There's no such thing as a mincha from lentils, when we know he's messing around. So says the Gemara, that's the Shita Beis Shammai. So you have Chizkiah, it's important to remember the names. Chizkiah said our mission follows Beis Shammai. Rav Yochanan said our mincha follows Beis Hillel, and it's dafka a case where we figure out that he meant it. Says the Gemara, Amar Chizkiah himself, who said that it follows Beis Shammai, who I just told you says it doesn't matter whether you said barley, lentils, cotton candy. It doesn't matter. You take the first part of the statement. Amar Chizkiah said, Lo shanu, you're only obligated to bring a carbon. El damar mincha min asa'arim. If he said from barley, Aval Amar mincha min adoshim, but if he said I'm going to bring a mincha from lentils, loy. Now that's strange, because Chizkiah is the one who's masber like Beis Shammai. This statement of Chizkiah makes sense according to Beis Hillel. According to Beis Hillel, we'll try to get into your mindset, and we'll say, okay, maybe he meant it by barley, but he definitely didn't mean it by lentils. According to Beis Shammai, I don't care what he meant. We take the first part of your statement. You said mincha, done. Stop right there, like a wall comes down. So why would Chizkiah, who's masber the Gemara like Beis Shammai, then say that there's a nafka mina whether you said barley or lentils? There's no nafka mina. It doesn't make sense. So the Gemara says, you're right, Chizkiah changed his mind. Originally, Chizkiah was masber the Gemara like Beis Shammai. According to Beis Shammai, it would make no distinction whether you said a mincha min asar, a mincha min adoshim, it doesn't make a difference. Then Chizkiah changed his mind and he said, no, I actually want to explain it like Beis Hillel, like Rav Yochanan. And Beis Hillel would make a distinction between barley and lentils. By barley, where it's possible he made a mistake because barley, there are carbonates from barley, then it's possible that it's a legit neder. But from lentils, where it's a shtuyot, it's nothing, then it's nothing. So Chizkiah, when he said that there's a distinction between barley and lentils, changed his view of who's the author of the Mishnah. He's no longer explaining the Mishnah like Beis Shammai, he's now hopping on the bandwagon of Yochanan to be masber the Mishnah like Beis Hillel. Says the Gemara, Michti, I don't understand. Chizkiah kaman amar l'shmaite. Who is Chizkiah explaining the Mishnah? Beis Shammai. Beis Shammai just cares about the first part of the statement. Mali min asharim, min asarim, mali min adashim. Why would he make a difference between barley and lentils? So the Gemara says, you're right. Hadarbe. Chizkiah retracted his view, and he's now explaining the Mishnah like Beis Hillel. And Beis Hillel would say that there's a distinction between barley and lentils, because Beis Hillel believes that he actually meant it as a neder, but only when it's plausible. Says the Gemara. My time why did he change his mind? Because he looked at the Mishnah, meaning he's explaining the Mishnah like Beis Shammai. Perfect. So why did he change his mind to explain it like the Mishnah, like Beis Hillel? Because he said to himself, why did the Mishnah talk about barley? Why not say a bigger chiddush? Say lentils. Because according to Beis Shammai, you're going to have to bring a carbon whether you said barley or lentils. The very fact that it says barley and not lentils indicates that it's following Beis Hillel, and he retracted his view. Says the Gemara, "My area detani mincha min asarim litzim min adashim el shma min amishum detoyihu." The truth is, he obviously recognized that the reason why the Mishnah the Mishnah, the Iker Chi of why you have to bring a carbon is not because of Beis Shammai that we follow the first statement, but rather because according to Beis Shammai, just say barley. According to Beis Shammai, the Iker is you go by the first part of the statement. You could say cotton candy and say that it's a bigger chiddush. The answer is the reason why Mishnah says barley is because it's following Beis Hillel. And Beis Hillel will only be mechayev you a carbon by barley where it's possible you made a mistake, as opposed to lentils where everyone knows there's no such thing as a carbon from lentils. The Gemara says Shema minam shedatayi b'sayim tayi ba'adashim leitayi. So originally Chizki explained it like Beis Shammai, and now he follows Rav Yochanan to explain it like Beis Hillel. Now here's the strange part. Rav Yochanan is masbeh the Mishnah like Beis Hillel. And as I've told you many times, according to Beis Hillel, there's a distinction between barley and lentils. But says the Gemara, Rav Yochanan Amar afilu min adashim. Rav Yochanan now throws a wrench into the system, and he says, although I explain the Mishnah like Beis Hillel, you'll also have to bring a carbon if you mention lentils. Now that doesn't make any sense. According to Beis Hillel, there is a distinction between barley and lentils, not according to Beis Shammai. So it says the Gemara, Michdi, Rav Yochanan kaman amar l'shmaitei, Beis Hillel, Beis Hillel mishum d'toihi, b'sarin toihi b'adashim le'toihi. Why is Rav? It's like a weird thing. Chizkiah, who originally explained like Beis Shammai, then changed his mind to Beis Hillel. Now Rav Yochanan, who originally changed it who explained it like Beis Hillel, is now saying that there's a distinction between barley and lentils. That there's no distinction between barley and lentils. That even by lentils you'll be chayav a carbon. That's very strange. So the Gemara says, I'll say it out so we'll see it inside. Rav Yochanan did not change his mind. Rav Yochanan is masbeh the Mishnah like Beis Hillel. That there is, and therefore there's a distinction between whether you said you're going to bring a mincha from barley or mincha from lentils. So why did he say that there's no distinction? He was explaining to Chizkiah. Why did Chizkiah change his mind? Chizkiah originally was masbeh the Gemara like Beis Shammai, that you always go with the first lashon, first lashon rishon. Why did Chizkiah change his mind to jump on the bandwagon of Beis Hillel? Because he said the Mishnah said barley. If it's true that the Mishnah follows Beis Shammai, it should say lentils. The fact that it says barley indicates it's not Beis Shammai. And he jumped on the bandwagon of explaining the Mishnah like Beis Hillel. To that, Rav Yochanan is responding, you don't have to change your mind. You could be masber the Mishnah like Beis Shammai. That's what Rav Yochanan meant. What do I mean? Beis Shammai's whole shita is that we go with the first part of your statement. Says Rav Yochanan like this, L'dvar of the Chizkiah Kamer. Rav Yochanan, when he said his statement, he's not saying that there's a difference, that even if you said barley, Beis Hillel would require you a carbon. Chizkiah is explaining to Rav Yochanan is explaining to Chizkiah, you don't have to change your mind. Again, why did Chizkiah change his mind? Because he said, if the Mishnah follows Beis Shammai, they always go with the first lashon. Why say barley? Say lentils. It's a bigger chiddush. To that, Rav Yochanan responded, no, that's not a good taina. Why? At my time, why did you change your view to explain the Mishnah no longer like Beis Shammai? Mishum delikatani min adashim. It's because the Mishnah didn't say lentils. I'll tell you why the Mishnah didn't say lentils. Dilma loy mi boy kamar. Perhaps it's adding a chiddush that it says barley and not lentils. Loy mi boy min hadashim. Dikla meimar meheder hu dahadar beyutzvus lashon rishon elafilu min asorim nami ikla meimar mitu katakatoi afilu hachi tzvus lashon rishon. Go to the next page. The answer is very simple, and that is, according to Beis Shammai, let's talk this out. According to Beis Shammai, is there a difference? The Beis Shammai's whole point is that you go with the first lashon. I say I'm going to bring a mincha from barley, I have to bring a mincha from wheat. I say I'm going to bring a mincha from lentils, I have to bring a mincha from wheat. I say I'm going to bring a mincha from cotton candy, I have to bring a mincha from wheat. The question is, what's a bigger chiddush? Interestingly enough, the bigger chiddush is barley. You'll say, why is that a bigger chiddush? Because I'll think like this. If I say I'm going to bring a mincha, and then I say I'm going to bring it from chicken soup, that's so outlandish and so ridiculous that clearly just go with his first lashon. He's clearly trying to retract, or he's not mistaken. He's clearly either messing around, trying to retract his view, go with the first lashon. But in the case of barley, Beis Shammai, it's taka chiddush. Why? Because when he said, I bring a mincha from barley, he might legitimately think that that's an option. And therefore, maybe Beis Shammai would say, we don't go with his first statement. Maybe Beis Shammai's whole essence is that when you have two statements that are contradictory, we go with the first one. But if you would say mincha from barley, that may not be two contradictory statements. Maybe he legitimately is trying to do that. Therefore, it's a chiddush that Beis Shammai. So Chizkiah looks at this and says, well, if it's Beis Shammai, why mention barley? Mention a bigger chiddush, lentils. It's not true. Lentils is lesser of a chiddush. Barley is a bigger chiddush. Because when you say you're going to bring a mincha from lentils, those are two ridiculous statements that don't work with each other. So go with the first one. That's Beis Shammai's whole thing. But when you have from barley, it's so close that maybe it's not two contradictory statements. Maybe it's just one statement. And therefore, because it's one statement, maybe you should not have to mechayev him a carbon. Kamash Malon, Beis Shammai's whole point is you go with the first statement, regardless of whether the second statement is outlandish, close or not close, you always go with the first statement. So therefore, the reason why the Mishnah said barley is not because it's not like Beis Shammai. It could be masber like Beis Shammai as well. Now, just to finish up this sugya, the Gemara says, Amar Ziri. Now, Rashi explains, Ziri follows Beis Shammai as well. But says Ziri, it depends on what he said. Again, Beis Shammai's whole point is you go with the first lashon. So says Ziri, Lo shanu el da Amar mincha, avaloi Amar mincha loy. Says Rashi, this is what it means. When do you say, I say I'm going to bring a mincha of barley? I have to bring a regular mincha according to Beis Shammai. Says Ziri, that's only true if you had the following diktuk. I said I'm going to bring mincha, min hasorim. Two separate statements, mincha, min hasorim. So because they're two separate statements, there's mincha, and then there's from barley. We look at them as two separate statements, we go with the first one. But if I said I'm going to bring a min hasorim, a barley mincha, then that's one statement, we can't dissect it, and we throw it out. That's Zeiri's point. So Zeiri's point is that even according to Beis Shammai, we only take your first statement when we could actually isolate them as two separate statements, in like diktuk. If we could like put a comma in between, then we'll say, okay, it's two separate statements, go with the first one. But if there's no comma in between, so if I say I'm going to bring a mincha that is comprised of barley, two separate statements. But if I say I'm going to bring a barley mincha, I can't separate it, and therefore we throw it out. That's Zeiri's point. So says the Gemara, wait a minute, now we have to go through each case of the Mishnah and just basically speak out that each case of the Mishnah has the ability to put a comma in between. Says the Gemara, Yosef Rav Nachman Karmelo Shmaita, Esvei Rav Nachman, Kemach. What's the next case of the Mishnah? A person says, I'm going to bring Kemach. What's the case? Now it just says Kemach. Two options. Either he says, I'm going to bring a mincha min ha-Kemach, comma in between, and therefore we separate them as two, and you can bring a carbon. Or, I'm going to bring a minchas Kemach. So what's the case? Yavi Solis, Lav Damar Mincha, Loi Damar Mincha. The case is where you said Mincha Min HaKemach. I mean, that's the point. It's not just said, it's not like where a guy gets up and he says, I'm going to bring Kemach. If you say I'm going to bring Kemach, there's no option to put a comma there, then it's no. The case is, I said I'm going to bring a Mincha Min HaKemach. Okay. Even though the Mishnah doesn't say that, that's what the Mishnah means. Let's come to the next case.
His case over here was that he didn't say the word mincha directly. He said kemach.
No, if he said kemach, then he would not be obligated to bring a carbon. It's dafka because he said mincha min kemach, then he's obligated because then Beis Shammai is able to split up his statement into two. Says the Gemara weiter, then the Mishnah said, B'loi shem and levaina. If a person says, I'm going to bring a carbon without oil and frankincense, you have to bring one as oil and frankincense. Again, what's the case? Is the case where he just said, I'm going to bring a carbon without oil and frankincense, or he said, I'm going to bring a mincha bali? That's the question. Is there a comma in between? My lav de loy amar mincha, loy damar mincha. The case is where he said mincha again. Let's keep going. Chatzi isaron. I'm going to bring.
Below is a very different from what we talked about. Everything's with something. This is without.
It's the same thing though. But if a person says, I'm going to bring a carbon below. I don't know how the syntax.
The amount that you're going to bring. If you're saying a different amount.
Oh yeah, maybe the case. Forget about carbon. He just says, I'm going to bring below Shem and below Lavona. No, just I'm going to bring below Shem and below Lavona. It's incumbent upon me to bring no oil, no frankincense. So that case, how could Beis Shammai? There's no lashon to hold on to. The answer is it's mincha below Shem and below Lavona. Mincha comma below Shem and below Lavona. Keep going. The next case, Chatzi Isaron. Right? If he says, I'm going to bring a Chatzi Isaron, he has to bring a holy Isaron. Again, did he just say, I'm going to bring Chatzi Isaron? No, because that's not a full statement. He said a mincha Chatzi Isaron. Says the Gemara, Yavi Isaron, my lab de lo mincha, lo damar mincha. Ihachi, wait a minute. Here's the question though. Ema Sefa Isaron mechza Yavi Shnayim. Go to the next case. He says, I'm going to bring a Isaron and a half. What's the halach? You have to bring two. Why? Because there's no such thing as Isaron and a half. The Gemara says, but once you're telling me that he's saying the word mincha, because that's each case, it's mincha. So he's saying, I'm going to bring a mincha, isaron umechza. For some reason, the Gemara says, if that's the case, then why does he have to bring two? Why don't we say, when he said, I'm going to bring an isaron, I'm going to bring a mincha, that's a mincha, and then what is this mincha comprised of? Isaron and a half. And the half is not a thing, so just it falls off. Meaning, if he's saying the word mincha, the mincha is mechayiv him a full isaron. So then when he said it, isaron and a half, then he's just saying an isaron. Okay, then the half doesn't mean anything. For some reason, the Gemara feels that if he said the word mincha, then the half of isaron really falls apart. It shouldn't really be mechayev you to isaronos. So says the Gemara, kivan damar mincha. If you tell me the cases, what by isaron umechza means, I'm going to bring a mincha, isaron umechza. The word mincha is a full isaron. Ki amar chatzi isaron lo klumu. Then when he says the half isaron, it's meaningless. So why does he have to bring two? So the Gemara says, I'll tell you the case. The case is not what you thought. It's not where he said a mincha, isaron umechza. No. The case is, loit tzricha, da amar harelai mincha, chatzi isaron vi-isaron. The isaron is at the end. So he said harelai mincha, that mincha is a full isaron. Then chatzi isaron, that's meaningless. Then isaron at the end, so he mentioned the isaron twice. He mentioned mincha, which is the equivalent of an isaron, and then he mentioned mechza, which is nothing, and then an isaron at the end, that's two isaronos. That's why. Meaning it's not, because if he said, harelai mincha, isaron umechza, we would just say that the isaron is an explanation of what he's bringing. But he said, harelai mincha. Stop. The word mincha means an isaron, because that's what a mincha is. Then he said mechza. That's meaningless. Isaron, the isaron is the second one. That's why you have to bring two. Says the Gemara, Kiven damar mincha, ichayv le isaron. Ki amar chatzi isaron v'lo klum, ki adam isaron, maisi isaron echrina. Here's the question though. If now that you're telling me that all of these cases he said a full mincha, and he said, that last case, let's go with that last case. A person says, I'm going to bring an isar, a mincha. Now stop right there. A mincha means an isaron. Mechza vi-isaron. So he mentioned mincha and isaron. That's two. Right? Two. So he has to bring two. Okay. Then what did Rav Shimon say in the Mishnah? Rav Shimon said, nah, nothing. He potter, legamri. Because his statement is ridiculous. Why is it so ridiculous? He said a mincha. He said an isaron. Now, if you're telling me the cases of the Mishnah are not what we had, scrap the entire last 10 minutes, and every single case there's no mincha. He just gets up and he says, Harei alai below Shem and below Lavona. I get why Rav Shimon wouldn't be cool with that. Or he says, Harei alai chatzi isaron. I get why Rav Shimon wouldn't be cool with that. But if every single time he's saying full statements, and he's saying, Harei alai mincha, avo below Shem and below Lavona. Okay, so we don't put, why is Rav Shimon's like, what he's saying is meaningless. Like, it's not so meaningless anymore. He's saying full statements now. We've now made it that he's saying full statements. So it says the Gemara, Ihachi, Rav Shimon Poiter, Shleisnadev, Kederech HaMisnadvin. Why? Amai. He's now saying full statements. So the Gemara says, no. This is what I mentioned when we did the Mishnah. Amarava, Rav Shimon, Beshitas Rav Yossi Amar, Damar Af Bigmar Dvarim Adam Matvis. Rav Shimon follows the Shita of Rav Yossi, that when a person says a statement, we don't take the first part of a statement, we don't take the end part of a statement, we take every part of it, we take the whole thing. For Rav Shimon to be mechayev you in a carbon, your entire statement has to make sense. If there's parts of your statement that are gibberish, even if they're in the middle, he's going to throw out the whole thing. So if a person says, Harei alai mincha, chatzi isaron, vi-isaron, the chatzi isaron, because it's meaningless, throw out the whole thing. That's why Rav Shimon just holds that we look at your whole statement, and if there's part of your statement that's shtuyot, then we throw out the whole statement. Okay, new Mishnah. The Mishnah says like this: Misnadev Adam mincha shel shishim isaron. The most a person can donate is a mincha of 60 isaron of flour. Now, it seems from the Rishonim that there was always a tradition that 60 was the max. The question is why. So says the Mishnah, Umaybe b'kli echad. You have to bring all 60 in one kli. Now, because of this, imam harei alai shishim echad. But if he were to say, I'm bringing 61 isaron, then maybe shishim b'kli echad, be'echad b'kli echad. You bring 60 in one and one in the other. Meaning, the most you can have in one kli is 60. If a person says, I'm bringing 61, you'll have to bring 61. But 60 in one kli, one in the other. Even if the guy's like, I have this giant kli, it can hold 100. No. 60 is the max in one kli. Now that seems to have just been a Masorah, that 60 was the max in one kli. The question is why? So the Tanoim offer different reasons. The first Tana Shita, which I think it's Rav Yehuda Bar Eloi, the Gemara is going to explain. Yeah, it's Rav Yehuda Bar Eloi, the Gemara is going to explain. Why is 60 the max? And Rav Yehuda Bar Eloi saying it's a very strange answer. I mean strange, I have a hard time understanding it. What's the most isaron that are brought in one day? You don't have to guess. The most that are brought in one day is the first day of Sukkot if it falls out on Shabbos. Rashi has a whole cheshbon how the first day of Sukkot, there's 12 pars, and each par brings 13 pars, each par brings 3 isarons, that's 39 right there, and then you have Shabbos, and you got B'kitzer, the most that isaron that day, not in one kli, just daily, is the first day of Sukkot, it falls on a Shabbos. How much? 61. So because 61 is brought by Klal Yisrael in one day, you don't get to bring 61 in one kli. Now, even though on Sukkot, when it falls down on Shabbos, it's not being brought in one kli. It's being brought throughout a 12-hour period in multiple kalim. For whatever reason, because the tzibur does not bring more than 61, it brings 61, you don't get to match it by bringing 61. Even though it's not a match, because you're bringing in one kli, they're bringing it throughout the day, but that's the concept, says Rabbi Bar Eloi. So it says the Mishnah, Shekein matzino b'tzibur b'yom tov rishon shel chag shechal yos b'Shabbos shisha ve'echad. So because the tzibur brings 61 in one day, you should be a little bit less than them. You only bring 60. Okay. Amr Rav Shimon says, Haloi elu leparim ve'elu lekvasim. Ve'elu mevlam zeh. Says Rav Shimon, I understand, they're not being brought in one kli. You're right, throughout Sukkot, on the first day of Sukkot, when it's Shabbos, they're bringing 61, but they're bringing it throughout the day in different kalim. What are we talking about? So says Rav Shimon, I don't think that's the reason why you can't have 61 in one kli. I'll tell you why. Rav Shimon believes, we had this machlokes tanoim earlier in the Masechta, how many jugs of oil, lug of oil do you bring if you bring 60, let's say 60 isaron? So you had a machlokes, either 60 lug or one lug. Let's go with the view that it's one lug. You have to be able to mix it. You can't mix one lug of oil in 61. You can mix it with 60, but 61, it's too much. In one kli, one lug of oil will not distribute properly in 61 isar. So because it won't mix properly, it's not an option. Says Rav Shimon, Ela ad shishim yichol livlo. 60 isaron can be brought in one kli because up to 60 isaron, it's able to be mixed with the oil. But more than that is not capable. Yeah. Once the flour exceeds 60 isaron, it will not blend homogeneously with such a small amount of oil. Okay. So because you'll bring it in two separate kalim, two separate jugs of oil. Good. Now says the Gemara, says the Mishnah Vayter, Amr Loi, they said to Rav Shimon, this is also a strange back and forth. They said to Rav Shimon, so you're telling me up to 60 it could blend properly, but not 61? Isn't that pretty like specific? So Amr Loi, Shishim nivlalim, Shishim echad ein nivlalim. So it'll mix with 60 and not 61. So he responded to them, Amr Lahem, call me this chacham came. That's like all halach in the world, right? Right? 10 people I could daven with a minute, but not 9? Yes. So, yeah, that's the thing. Right? You could go to the mikveh in 40 saw, but if it's 39.999, you can't. Oh, that's the way it works. That's life. So, 60 saw you can mix, not 61. Okay, fine. Now, the Gemara will explain a longer conversation. We'll get to the next mission. We'll be done in about 3 or 4 minutes. It's very quick. The Gemara will explain a long conversation. It's the same shitas, but just speaking it out. Shol Shilo Lamaylam Rabbi Bar Eloi. They asked Rabbi Bar Eloi the following question: Menayin loy maharei shishim ve'echad, maybe shishim b'kli achad ve'echad b'kli achad. Why is that 60 is the most you can bring in one kli? So Pasach Rabbi Bar Eloi Roshim Dam Chol Makom. Rabbi Bar Eloi, who always speaks first. The reason why he always speaks first is because of the story of Lag BaOmer, right? Rav Yehuda and Rav Shimon were arguing that Rav Yehuda says that the Romans were good, and Rav Shimon said they're not good, and Rav Shimon was going to be destined to death. But Rav Yehuda, because he spoke positively of the Romans, got a reward from the Romans that he always speaks first. So Rav Yehuda Bar Eloi speaks first. Rav Yehuda Bar Eloi said, "Shekem matzinu tzibur meviim b'yom tov rishon shel chag shechal yis b'Shabbos shishim ve'echad dai liyachas shivchas min hatzibur echad." Because 61 is the amount of minchas that are brought, isaron of flour that's brought on the most days, the most in one day by a tzibur. So you don't get to match the tzibur. So Amar Loi Rav Shimon, the same Rav Shimon, by the Rav Shimon Bar Yochai. Maybe this took place in Lag BaOmer, that first Lag BaOmer. So Rav Shimon Bar Yochai said to Rav Yehuda, by the way, Rav Shimon, there's a Messiah from Rishonim that Rav Shimon is always Rav Shimon Bar Yochai before the cave. After the cave, he's Bar Yochai. So it's interesting. So Rav Shimon, before the cave. So haloi elu parim ve'elu ve'elu kvasim. They're different karbanis. They're being brought in different kalim. What do I care that in one day it accumulates 61? What are you talking about? You're talking about a one kli as opposed to throughout the day. So elu blilam ava, elu racha. They're not even the same consistency. Some have more oil, some have less. Some are in the morning, some are in the afternoon. They're not mixed together. So what are you talking about? So says Rav Shimon, Amalei Amarata. So review this, says Rav Shimon. So you tell me, why is 60 the max? So says Rav Shimon, the flour has to mix with the oil. And it has to be able to mix properly. And it won't be able to mix properly in 61, just in 60. Call me this Chacham Kenu. And if Shim, so they said, so they said, what, 61 it can't? Well, all of a sudden it's such a, like a hard stop. Call me this Chacham Kenu. That's the derech of Torah. Barbaim sahu toivel. You have to go into the mikvah 40 sa. Barbaim sachas a quart of any yachal litzvol. You can't go into the mikvah a little bit less than that. Kibeya metamatum asaychlin. Kibeya chas shum shemein metamatum asaychlin. Right? A kibeya is able to transfer tumah of food, but a beya minus a sesame seed is not. Shloisha metama midra. Shloisha chasanima. Ain't metama midras. Again, there's odar. So the Gemara is a quick question. This is one of the most famous lines in all of Shas, and now we're actually seeing the source of it. So Rav Shimon's saying you can't bring 61 because it won't blend properly. Here's the problem. You don't even have to blend the oil properly. Even if you don't blend the oil properly in the flour, it's still yotza. If you don't mix the oil with the flour, it's kosher. So what do I can't? You can't bring 61 because it can't mix well. You don't even have to mix it b'chalal. So says Rav Shimon, the famous line, Amar Zera, Kala roy labila ein bila makeves. V'she'ein roy labila bila makeves. If you're able to mix it, then you're yotza if you don't mix it. But if it's not possible to mix it, then it's a problem. So is this mixing it important or not? The answer is, it depends whether it can. If it can mix it, then even if you don't mix it, it's fine. But if you can't mix it, then it's a problem. Then just to finish up, because we mentioned the derech of Chazal being very specific with shiurim, the Gemara just says the following story. I don't understand the story; it's very fascinating to me. I'm not really sure why it's here, and I'm not really sure parts of the story are very interesting. Amar Rav Bibi, Amar Rav Yeshua ben Levi, Maisa bepir da'acha shel Rebbe shemesa. There was a certain mule in Rebbe's house that died. V'shira chacham es dama b'revius, and the blood oozed out of it, and it was a revius of blood that oozed out of it. So they said that it's tameh. Now we find by an animal that an animal is metame, a carcass of an animal, the blood that oozed out of the mule. We find that the carcass of an animal, dead animal, is metame with a kazayas. So a kazayas of blood, a revius, because it congeals to a kazayas of blood, oozed out of the animal. And they said the blood is metame. What they're being mechadish is basically that the blood of a dead animal is metame. We don't really find that. We find that with the carcass, but they're being mechadish with the blood as well. Okay. Masav Rav Yitzchak bar Bizna, Rav Yitzchak bar Bizna asked the following question: Hey, Rav Yeshua ben Beseira, al dam nevelu shutar. They said the blood of a dead animal is not metame. A blood of a person is metame for sure. Carcass of an animal, not the blood of an animal. They said it's tahar, and I'll prove it to you. Rav Yeshua Levi. This is a kasha to Rav Bibi. This is a question to Rav Bibi. So they said, I'll prove it to you. Apparently, they were spearing wild donkeys to feed the lions by the king. One day, as the Jews were going up a regel, the Romans or the Greeks or whoever in charge at the time were trying to feed the lions of the king with wild donkeys, and they were spearing the wild donkeys and attacking the wild donkeys while the Jews are trying to walk past. It says the Gemara, the Jews are oil regel, they were covered up in their ankle, in their thighs in blood. Meaning there was blood everywhere. Now, if blood is metama, they're going to oil regel. They have to be tahar. So vais tachais v'loy amru lahem davar, and the rabbis didn't object. So what do you see from here? You see from here that Yeshua says he's a tana that the blood of a dead animal is not metama. Now Rav Bibi ishtik. Rav Bibi couldn't respond. So Amar le Rav Zrika said to him, "My tana lemahadamark." No, give an answer. So Amar le, I'll tell you outside what he's about to say, and then we'll end with this. For what he's about to say is that the reason why I can't answer is because my parnas is not going well, and because my parnas is not going well, I live day to day. I don't have the head to answer. It's interesting. So he says, Amar le, heichi ada. How could I respond? Didn't Rav Chanan what say? Your life will hang in the balance. And what does that mean? That's someone who has to live from paycheck to paycheck. And the pasuk says you'll be frightened day and night. That's someone who lives from food from week to week. You won't trust in your life. By the way, it's interesting because this type of lifestyle is always considered like a high level of emunah type of lifestyle. But he's saying, I can't handle this. And he says, Vahu Gavra and myself. Vahu Gavra means he's talking about himself. Al Palter Samach. I'm relying on day to day. I don't have the head because my parnas is not going well. I don't have the head. I don't have Yishuv Das. Rabbeinu Tam, by the way, they would say when he was writing Taisus, when he was writing Rabbeinu Tam, he would sit with gold coins and flip the gold coins in his hand because it gave him Yishuv Das. I don't know. So he said, I don't have Yishuv Das. So my Havela, so what's the conclusion? He said that the blood of an animal is matama. The story says that it's not matama. You know what the answer is? It's a machlekes tanoim. We'll end with this. Rav Yosef, Rav Yehuda, Moraina the Benasiya Hava. The answer is Rav Yehuda Hanasi Rav Yehuda was the authority of the Nasi's household. And he paskin that the blood of an animal is matama. And by the way, Rav Yehuda is a Tana. So Rav Yeshua said a Maisa with the oil of regalim. So Rav Yehuda argues with him. It's a machlekes tanoim. The Tanya, as the Brisa says, Rav Yehuda Oimer Shisha Dvarim Mekuli Beishamai Mechumra Beis Hillel. There are 6 things that are the kuli of Beishamai and the chumra of Beis Hillel, and one of them is dam nevelis, the blood of a nevela, and it is metame. Beishamai metirin, Beis Hillel metame. It's machlekes tanoim. And Rav Yosi Bar Yehuda Ab Mishatam Beis Hillel Loitamu Ela Brevius Hoil B'Yachal Likdosh. The amount of blood that Rav Yehuda's matama of a dead animal is a kazayis, and a kazayis is a congealed kazayis is a revius in liquid. So it's machlekes tanoim. So that answers that question.